United States of America in July 1944. So in this meeting, they proposed to establishment of the International Monetary Fund and also International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, World Bank, the International Trade Organization also. So of these three institutions, IMF and IBRD means International Monetary Fund and World Bank were established while the ITO could not be set up. So instead, the General Agreement and Tariffs and Trade was established as an interim arrangement. So from 1948 to 1994, the trading system came under GATT. So the WTO, World Trade Organization, emerged out of the GATT in 1995. So all these three international institutions, IMF, IBRD, GATT, originated in wartime, planning for a better economic future in the post-war period, dissatisfied with the efforts of Bretton Woods institutions, that is, World Bank, IMF, GATT, to the problems of economic development. So the coalition of developing countries called for an international conference on the trade and development. So the socialist countries strongly supported this platform. So as a result, in 1964, United Nations General Assembly established United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, that is UNCTAD, as its subsidiary organ. UNCTAD is a major institution that gives preferential treatment for developing countries. So apart from this, these three institutions are established for the purpose of free trade system and international economic relations between the member states in the United Nations organization. So the factors that lead to global economic and trade organizations are, after the World War II, the advent of the First World War massively disrupted international trading. So to establish an international trade organization, then the President of United States and Prime Minister of United Kingdom issued Atlantic Charter on 14 August 1941. Subsequently, the work began in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference. The representatives of 44 nations of United States, United Kingdom, and other countries assembled at Bretton Woods on July 1, 1944. They discussed and considered the proposal for the Global Economic and Organization. From the deliberations on these plans emerged the complementary Global Economic and Trade Organization, IBRD, IMF, UNCTAD, GATT, and WTO institutions were established after this meeting. So now we are going to discuss about the concept of World Bank. So the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development was established in December 1945. So this International Bank International Bank is established for the economic assistance for the member nations in the world. So it started business in 1946 July and joined the International Development Association in 1960 to form the World Bank. So the IBRD and the IDA, International Development Association, work with the other three institutions of the World Bank group, the International Finance Corporation, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, MIGA, the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, ICSID. So by the 2018, the World Bank Group was one of the world's largest sources of funding and knowledge for developing countries. Of the five institutions, the IBRD and the IDA are the World Bank's two largest units. So if we discuss about the structure of the World Bank, the IBRD is governed by the World Bank's Board of Governors. So the Board of Governors in the supreme policy making body. So it consists of a governor, it meets annually, it delegates most of its authority over daily matters such as lending and operations to the Board of Directors. So the Board of Directors consists of 25 executive directors and is chaired by the president of the World Bank Group. So it meets regularly once a month to carry on the work of the bank. So the president of the World Bank Group is the chief executive of the bank and is responsible for the conduct of the day-to-day business of the bank. So the executive directors collectively represent all 189 member states of the World Bank. So the objectives and the guiding principles of the World Bank are to provide long run capital to member countries for economic development, to induce long run capital investment for balanced development of international trade, and to provide guarantee for loans granted to small and large units and other projects of member countries, to ensure the implementation of development projects, to promote capital investment in members countries. So here the in this World Bank group there are almost 189 member states are there. So this IBRD is helps always helps to provide financial assistance to these 189 member states to develop their economy and to provide such institutions based to provide employment in their countries. So the IBRD is responsible for the economic development of their member states. So the World Bank offers support to developing countries through policy advice, research and analysis, and technical assistance. And also it supports um, capacity development in the countries. It grants loans to a member country up to 20% of share in the paid up capital. So it provides loan to private investors to belonging to the member countries on its own guarantee. And also it sponsors, hosts, and participates in many conferences and forums on issues of development. So often in collaboration with partners too. It helps the member countries to access the best global expertise. And also the IBRD is playing a main role providing loans for development works to the member states, especially to underdeveloped countries. Like uh, two-third members of United Nations organizations are two-third member nations are just a second. Please ignore background sounds. So the IBRD is playing a main role of providing loans for development works to member countries. So there are 189 members are there. In that 189 members, many of the members, like almost two-thirds of members are underdeveloping countries. Even in United Nations organization, there are 193 member states are there. In that also, around two-thirds members are underdeveloping nations, like India. So it is providing long-term loans for various development projects of 5 to 20 years duration. It has been working with two goals to achieve by 2030. And also these goals are to end extreme poverty by decreasing the percentage of people living on below sustenance level. So, and also IBRD to promote their prosperity for fostering their income growth. So the World Bank is acting vital source for the financial and technical assistance to the developing nations. So so uh, so the IBRD is a global development cooperative owned by 189 member countries. So together IBRD and IDA form the World Bank, which provides financing, policy advice, and technical assistance to the developing countries. So majorly major functions, if we see the IBRD and its functions, it's majorly established for an international financial assistance whose purposes including assisting the development of its member states, territories, promoting and supplementing private foreign investment, and promoting long range balance, and also providing financing and advice and research and developing nations to aid their economic advancement. So the World Bank predominantly acts an organization that attempts to fight poverty by offering development assistance to middle and low income countries. So if we see the main objective of World Bank IBRD to provide long-term capital to members countries for economic reconstruction and development, and also uh, so from after the establishment of World Bank from the 1946, according to Bretton Woods Conference, the IBRD functioning started from the 1946 to till date. It helps many countries in favor of economic development for its member countries. So even World Bank helps developing countries like India in providing loans for development works in the countries like India. So, and also the International Monetary Fund also, it's a part of Bretton Woods, and also we will call it IBRD and IMF as Bretton Woods twins, because after the meeting of Bretton Woods, these two institutions were set up by the United Nations organization. So the IMF, International Monetary Fund, was established in 1945 when 29 member countries signed its articles of agreement. It began operations on March 1, 1947. So France became the first country to borrow from the IMF. The IMF's membership began to expand in 1950s and 1960s as many African countries become independent and applied for membership. Almost the International Monetary Fund is an international organization of 189 member countries at present. So equally with IBRD, IMF also working on the same purpose. The fund aims to provide exchange rate stability, temporary assistance to member, and international sponsoring of measures for curbing disequilibrium in the balance of payments of countries. So the resources of the International Monetary Fund come from two sources, namely one is subscription by members in the form of quotas and borrowings. So most resources for International Monetary Fund loans are provided by the member countries, primarily through their payment of quotas. Its focus of attention since the 1950 has been the developing countries in general and the least developed member countries in particular. So if we see the primary objectives of this International Monetary Fund are to promote international monetary cooperation through a permanent institutions. That's what this International Monetary Fund is established for this purpose, to facilitate the expansion and balanced growth of international trade, and also to promote exchange stability, to maintain orderly exchange arrangements among members, and also to assist in the establishment of a multilateral system of payments, and also to give confidence to their members by making the fund available to them. So the member states are willing to get help from this International Monetary Fund in case of when they are in financial crisis. So if we see the structure of the International Monetary Fund, like IBRD, the IMF also is having its board of governors and an executive board, a managing director, and a staff of international civil servants. So the board of governors is the highest decision making body of this International Monetary Fund. It consists of one governor and one alternate for each member country. The board of governors delegates most of its powers to the IMF's executive board. So if we see the International Monetary Fund's is established by these member states. The IMF Board of Governors is advised by two ministerial committees, the International Monetary and Financial Committee and the Development Committee. So the IMF is accountable to its 188 member governments. Its work is scrutinized by multiple stakeholders like political leaders, officials, media, civil society, and academic institutions. And also official groups such as the group of 20 G20 and the group of 8 G8 are also actively engaged in the work of the International Monetary Fund. If we see the primary functions of this International Monetary Fund, it serves as a short-term credit institution. If the member country is in need of getting assistance for improving its balance of payments, the IMF helps such country who are in need of financial assistance. And also, IMF provides a mechanism for improving long-term balance of payments position. And also, it provides a mechanism for international consultations. It brings together the representatives of the member countries for reconciling conflicting claims. If we see the role of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF plays an important role in helping the member governments in meeting the challenges posed by globalization and economic development. It works to ensure the stability of the international monetary and financial system. It plays an important role in examining the economic policies of member countries. And also, the IMF tracks global economic trends and alerts its member countries to tackle economic difficulties. And also, it provides policy advice and financing to members in the economic difficulties. And also, the IMF has also responded to the needs of a market dominated world economy. And also, the International Monetary Fund provides emergency assistance to members facing urgent balance of payments needs. So, in case of any country needs emergency in the financial matters, then the IMF is therefore to help such nations. And also, one more institution is there, that is UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. It is also established by the United Nations Organization. In 1964, UNCTAD established as its subsidiary organ. So, United Nations General Assembly established this institution. So, the intellectual support of this establishment of UNCTAD came from Raul Prebisch, the organization's first secretary general. From the beginning, these institutions has been a major institution promoting the development of a gold trading system that promotes the preferential treatment for developing countries. The first session of the conference held in Geneva in 1964. So far, UNCAD have held 14 conferences. If you see the structure of the organization of UNCTAD, it's a organ of United Nations General Assembly. UN was a subsidiary institution. So it is neither a specialized agency nor a supreme governing body. So its structure consists of a conference, the Trade and Development Board, and subsidiary intergovernmental bodies together with the Secretariat of United Nations Organization. So the conference is the UNCTAD's highest policy making body. It is the forum for its 195 member states to discuss their policy options and formulate global policy on trade and development. So, to carry out the functions of the conference between sessions, a 55 member TDB was established as the executive body of conference. So, the principles of UNCTAD are: every country has the right to freely dispose of its natural resources for its economic development. It can freely trade with other countries. So every country has right to trade with their neighboring nations or other nations to for the purpose of their economic development. So if we see, we are also importing and exporting many materials and raw materials, natural resources to our neighbors and developed nations too. So it will helps to for the economic development. So principle principles of sovereign equality of states, self-determination of people, and non-interference in the internal affairs are the principles which guide trade and economic relations between countries. And also, there shall be no discrimination on the basis of differences in socio-economic system. The adoption of various trading methods and policies shall be consistent with this principle. If we see the functions of UNCAD, the major functions are to promote international trade between the developed and underdeveloped countries, to accelerate economic development. So the UNCTAD is there for to strengthen the economic relationship between developed and developing nations. So special emphasis should be laid upon the accelerated development of the developing countries, and also to formulate the principles and policies on international trade, to negotiate multinational trade agreements, to make proposals for implementing its principles and policies, to promote research and support negotiations for developing countries, and also the UNCTAD to review and coordinate the activities of other institutions of United Nations relating to international trade and international economic development. And also, this institution is to act as a center for harmonious institution. So, if we see one more institution is there for the international economic relations, so that is General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. That is, we will call it as GATT. So the GATT was a post-war expansion. It was an international body, came into force on January 1, 1948 with an agreement among 23 nations. So the Geneva-based 128 nation GATT at the time of its modification had 2/3 of its members belonging to developing nations. So the GATT is especially established for the purpose of these tariffs and trade system. So if we see the objectives of this GATT, the GATT is established for to maintain free trade system between the member states, and to follow unconditional most favored nation principle, to carry on trade on the principle of non-discrimination, reciprocity, and transparency, to grant protection to domestic industry through tariffs only, to liberalize tariff and non-tariff measures through multilateral negotiations, and also to achieve these objectives. The agreement provided for multilateral trade negotiation, consultation and settlement disputes, and waivers to be granted in exceptional cases. Here, non-discrimination, reciprocity, and transparency means every nation has right to trade with other nations. So reciprocity means there is no written expectation. They can freely trade with other nation, like any neighboring nation or any other nation. So without expecting any return from them, any tax from them, only established for the purpose of free trade system. And there should be transparency. If there is a tariff system, if there is a imports and exports tariff system, that should be clear and understandable for the both or two or more nations. If we trade with two or more nations, all the member states should be transparent with this trade system. So if we see the principles or conventions of GATT, the four fundamental principles of GATT are there. Trade should be carried on the non-discrimination basis. Means there is no discrimination between any member states, like developed or underdeveloped, developed or developing, or developed nations or poor countries. So there should not be a discrimination in the part of this international trade system. And also, domestic industry should only be protected by means of customs, tariffs, and not through other commercial measures. So the aims of consultations should be the avoidance of damage to members' interests. And also, GATT should serve as a framework within which negotiations could be held to reduce tariffs and trade barriers. So this GATT is after the establishment of GATT. Many international institutions like World Trade Organization or IBRD or other financial institutions are especially established for the free trade system between the member states in the uh, international scenario. So we have one more topic is there, that is World Trade Organization. World Trade Organization is also an international institution that is especially established for the purpose of multilateral trade relations. So, these World Trade Organizations is an international trade organization having a set of rules and principles mutually designed and agreed upon to promote international trade in general and slash tariff barriers and import restriction in particular. So it is a new world trade order system. World Trade Organization has taken over GATT to implement the agreement reached at the eighth round of GATT negotiations, also known as the Uruguay round on December 15, 1993. So, in short, World Trade Organization is a newly globally recognized trade organization with the new name succeeding GATT on renewed agreements and having a new vision and together enforcement power to promote international trade system. World Trade Organization consists of a council for goods, a council for services, and a council for intellectual property rights. So here, the World Trade Organization, along with the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, will greatly influence world trade policy system. And also the deliberation on the contribution of the World Trade Organization to achieving greater coherence in the global economic policy making identifies the need for strengthening the relationship between the activities of the World Trade Organization, International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank as a way of ensuring greater coherence in global economic policies making. So, if we see the objectives, the scope of World Trade Organization and functions of the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization is a international organization similar in status to IMF and IBRD, having authority not only in trade and industrial products but also in agriculture products and services. Unlike GATT, WTO has a permanent legal status with a set of rules and procedures on multilateral trade agreements, and also which are not binding on member countries. Any member can stray out of an agreement without signing it. As on the day of its inception, there were 77 member countries with India as its one of the founding member. So since then the number of members countries WTO has been increasing. Presently there are 159 member countries are there in World Trade Organization. So the primary objectives of the World Trade Organizations are World Trade Organization. So at present, World Trade Organization is having 164 member countries till date. So the primary aim of World Trade Organization is to implement the new world trade system as visualized in the agreement, and also to promote world trade in a manner that benefits every country, to ensure that developing countries secure a better balance in the sharing of the advantages resulting from the expansion of international trade corresponding to their development needs, and also World Trade Organization to demolish all hurdles to an open world trading system and user in international economic relations, because the world trade is an effective instrument to foster economic growth and also to enhance competitiveness among all trading partners so as to benefit consumers and help in global integration, and also to increase the level of production and productivity with a view to improving the level of employment in the world, to expand and utilize world resources to the best, to improve the level of living for the global population and speed up economic development of the member nations. So there are 164 members, right? The World Trade Organization is responsible for this trading system, international trading system of its 164 member states. These objectives of the World Trade Organization are more or less are similar to the objectives of GATT. However, under the World Trade Organization, these are sought to be achieved following a more rigorous and together enforcement of the policy of export competition, market access, and free trade system. If we see the scope of the World Trade Organization, traditionally GATT was concerned with international trade in manufactured goods only. The GATT is the first multilateral agreement on trade, focusing on the progressive liberalization on trade and services. So the World Trade Organization established an agreement, that is the General Agreement on Trade in Services, GATS. So the agreement covers trade in all service sectors and the supply of service in all forms of agriculture. A controversial area has been included, and other areas having implication for the production process of goods are being gradually covered. So the new areas included under the trade agreements are trade related intellectual property rights, TRIPS, trade related investment measures, TRIMS, General Agreement on Trade and Services, GATS. So the World Trade Organization thus has much scope than GATT, as it covers a variety of goods and services to for the General Agreement on International Trade. And also World Trade Organization has together implementation power and wider acceptance for the implementation of the agreement than GATT. So if we see the functions of this World Trade Organization, as per the preamble of the World Trade Organization declared by the member nations, it has to perform 5 important functions. These are: one is World Trade Organization is to facilitate multilateral trade agreements and their implementation. World Trade Organization is to act as a facilitator in regard to the administration, operations, and implementation of multilateral trade agreements and other agreements are concerned. And second one is World Trade Organization shall also facilitate the administration, implementation, and operationalization of pluralistical trade agreement. And also third one is WTO is to negotiate all matters of member countries relating to multilateral trade system. Thus, it is to provide a negotiation platform to its members for solving their trade related problems. And also, World Trade Organization is to administer rules and procedures concerning settlement of disputes among the trading partners. World Trade Organization is to work in comparison with the International Monetary Fund and World Bank and their affiliated organizations for achieving better results in the area of international trade system. So after the establishment of World Trade Organization, almost there are many agreements has been made by the World Trade Organization. If we see, there are several agreements are there, like trade in agriculture. For more than 4 decades, agriculture sector has remained exclusive of GATT agreements, but the Uruguay round achieved a major breakthrough by bringing the agriculture sector within the purview of World Trade Organization. And also, agriculture trade has remained the most disputed of all other issues. However, there was a consensus on the need for a reform of agriculture trading policies. The major feature of the final act, the WTO, is supports in domestic level. It includes assistance to production. All countries have reduced domestic support price known as aggregate measures for support if it is an excess of 5% of the total value of production in case of developing countries and 10% of the total value of production in case of developing countries. Even these aggregate measures for support exceeds 10%, it has to be reduced in either US dollars or domestic currency. So, and also there is export competition. Spread of international competition is the undercurrent of objectives of World Trade Organization. Even though the preamble of the World Trade Organization does not explicitly state it, the rules and procedures framed under World Trade Organization favor competition in product market and also favor competition among the regulatory regimes. So the World Trade Organization prescribes rules for trade policy review mechanism and administers their implementation through reduction in trade barriers and abolition of discriminatory trade practices of World Trade Organization. Rules allow a contracting party to contest measures employed by another contracting party that nullify or impair such bindings or agreements. So, trade in textile and clothing agreements also arranged by the World Trade Organization. The discriminatory quantitative restrictions have been prevalent in the textiles and clothing sector for over 30 years under short-term arrangements, long-term arrangements until 1974, and multi-fiber arrangements up to 1994 December 31st. So, the trade relating intellectual property rights agreements also important after the establishment of World Trade Organization. So, in short, we will call it as TRIPS. TRIPS related to 9 types of intellectual property. The agreement is yet to specify norms and standards of protection. However, a provision also made to review the status after 4 years from 1999. In the meantime, the member countries are given the option of following sui generis system in place of patenting countries where there is no tradition for patents. So, TRIPS means property rights, intellectual property. If we take an example of patent rights, copyrights, so like for the production based items. So, it also helps for the to reduce the patent issues, and also trade related investment measures, we will call it as TRIMS, like subsidies. Certain trade related investment measures are regarded as a form of protection which divert and enhance inefficient production. TRIMS provide for abolition of all such restrictions, measures, and conditions imposed on foreign investors. So the member countries are required to offer national treatment and all such facilities to all foreign investors as are available to their domestic investors, and also to remove all TRIMS within a period of 5 years, not to force external investors to make investment in the priority areas of host country, and to extend all facilities to foreign investors so as to raise the level of global output and employment, and thereby ease the balance of payments problems of the member countries. So the provisions of TRIMS under World Trade Organization opens up opportunity for foreign investors to invest anywhere in the world in any economic activity. So the agreement further ensures that all the units, whether indigenous or foreign, shall be treated at par without any discrimination in terms of regulations and policies. A condition, however, can be imposed regarding fulfillment of export obligation to balance the outflow and inflow of foreign exchange for such venture. So the general agreement on trade services is also important activity made by the World Trade Organization. So we will call it as GATS is the first multilateral agreement on trade focusing on progressive liberalization of trade in services. It provides for secure and more open market in services in a similar manner as the GATT provided for trade in goods. So the agreement covers trade in all service sectors and the supply of service in all forms. So, and also World Trade Organization acts as a dispute settlement agency. From the perspective of developing countries, it should be noted that the elements of the 1966 decision on dispute settlement will continue to apply under the World Trade Organization dispute settlement procedures. It contains features of specific interest on developing countries, including automatic access to the goods offices of the Director General of the World Trade Organization to medicate and seek to find a satisfactory resolution to the dispute, and the shorter time limits in which panels must complete their deliberations. And also, the World Trade Organization acts as monitoring of trade policies. So, the trade policies review body to examine regularly the trade policies and practices of member states every 2 years for the four major traders, like every 4 years for the next 16 leading traders, and every 6 years for the remaining traders. Although longer intervals may be prescribed for least developed countries. So, if we see the relationship between the India and World Trade Organization, India is one of the founder member of the World Trade Organization. India has 90% of its trade with those countries who are members of World Trade Organization. India has been following its commitments to the World Trade Organization and respecting decisions of World Trade Organization in accordance with the signed agreements. Accordingly, quantitative restrictions on imports have been abolished and tariff rate has been streamlined. India has also been following the TRIPS and GATS agreements according to World Trade Organization guidelines. However, there has been lot of debate on the issue whether India would gain or lose by becoming member of World Trade Organization and signing its agreements. Many agreements has signed by the India in favor or against India becoming a member of the World Trade Organization. So an argument against India as member of WTO is there. The critics are of the opinion that agreements on the provisions of GATT and World Trade Organization will be beneficial to developed countries alone, and underdeveloped countries like India stand to lose. Entry of foreign companies in India will rob our culture and traditions, and the country will be founded on the pattern of East India Company. Once communist leader Somnath Chatterjee opinioned that the final document of GATT and WTO is the document that will render India as a colony of developed countries once again. Future generations of the nation will never forgive the ruling party for such a blunder. Following arguments are given against GATT and WTO. So there are several disadvantages are there for being member in World Trade Organization, like disadvantages to agriculture sector. It is apprehended that by including agriculture in GATT and WTO, Indian farmers will become dependent on multinational companies for improved seeds and agriculture technology. So the farmers will not be able to save superior quality seeds from their crop and will be compelled to buy patented seeds at high rate in the open market. Of course, using patented seeds amount to using improved farm technology, but it would be beyond the affordable range of the bulk of farming population in India, which comprises small and marginal holders. So big farmers alone will be able to take advantage of improved farm technology, but the ultimate consequence would be that small farmers will be forced to sell their lands. So this will aggravate the problems of unemployment in rural sector. Also, plants and cattle feeds will come under the ambit of patents and accordingly under the control of multinational companies. So this will certainly be injurious to business interest of the Indian farmers undertaking horticulture and cattle farming. Further, by increasing market exposure of the Indian farmer, patenting will not only neutralize the impact of such policies of a minimum support price. And also, critics are of the opinion that after concluding GATT and WTO agreements, subsidy to agriculture sector will be slashed. It will only compound the misery of small and marginal holders who are in constant struggle to take out their living through farming. And also, there are arguments against TRIPS and TRIMS and patent rights. Unlike developed nations, India does not recognize patents in the fields of medicines, food grains, and chemical products. However, in due course, all the member countries of World Trade Organization are required to accord recognition to product patents. India has been given a period of 10 years to make provisions for the patents. With the enforcement of the system, prices of the existing medicines are expected to take a steep hike. Multinational companies may file claims against copying their patents. Indian researchers will face the formidable task for providing them to be wrong. And also, foreign ownership of plants and animals also included in these World Trade Agreements. These can be purchased by MNCs, which will give great leverage to the companies in terms of their control of fragile economy of less developing countries like India. And also, there are several disadvantages to service sector. It is feared that World Trade Organization will adversely affect our service sector, banking, insurance, transport, and education and hotel services as offered by MNCs are a superior compared with the domestic standards. As a result, indigenous units engaged in rendering the services will be marginalized to wind up, causing a blow to the domestic entrepreneurship. So, argument in favor of India as member of WTO, there are multi-trade negotiations are there, freedom to use seeds and trade related trims. There are several critics also there, and also progress is also there. Progress in fulfillment of India's commitments to the World Trade Organization. So after the establishment of this World Trade Organization, there are several free trade system establishment also there. If you see the establishment of World Trade Organization, this institution is there for to promote world trade without taxes, without tariffs, and they are implementing a reciprocal principle in this trade system, and also to ensure the developing countries secure a better balance in the sharing of advantages resulting from the expansion of international trading system. So India also one of the founding member of this World Trade Organization. So after the establishment of World Trade Organization, many relaxations also given by the World Trade Organizations to the underdeveloped and poor countries. So after the world wars, establishment of these financial institutions like IBRD, IMF, UNCTAD, GATT, and WTO, there are several changes, and there is a competitive atmosphere is there in the international trade system, and innovative technologies, also competition among the member states. So, in these international economic cooperations, these five international financial institutions are important for the making of these institutions actively to promote international trade and international um, financial relationship between the member states. So, on tomorrow's class, we are going to discuss about the MNCs and also globalization. MNCs means multinational corporations. So, in that topic, we are going to discuss about the definition, characteristics of multinational corporations, and also the process of globalization, and advantages and disadvantages of globalization. So, I am concluding the session. Thanks for the participation.